Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about my game's theme. That's games plural and theme singular. Because I want to talk to you about how you can look at all the games I've made, especially the ones I was fundamentally involved with creating the original IP, but also ones that I worked on, and how you can interpret them through the single lens of one theme. Now, you may be thinking my theme is choice and consequence, but I view that less as a theme and more as a mechanic. So, I've talked about setting, story, mechanics. All my games have had very different settings. All of them have very different stories. They've had very different mechanics, but one of the overriding thing that determined both the story and mechanics was the player gets to choose to do things and then has to live with the consequences of their actions. But I don't view that as a theme. Maybe it's a theme. It's more of I view it as like a mechanistic property of all of my games. Instead, I think that all of my games have had one single theme, which I mentioned in a video about capitalism, which blew up into a whole bunch of other things. That theme is, it is human nature to corrupt systems of power. And that's it. That single theme can be found fundamentally in all of my games. So let's take a look at 3 of my games that I was involved very deeply and from day one on the creation of that IP. So let's look at Fallout. In the capitalism video, a lot of people are like, well, I thought you were denouncing capitalism. It's like, there was a denouncement of institutions of power, but the main theme of Fallout was, and it says right at the beginning when it talks about how war never changes, I'm saying it's human nature to go after wealth, to be greedy, to take things. If no one's using them, you take them. If someone else is using them, you fight them and take them anyway. This is just the way things have always worked. It worked this way before we had an agricultural society. Before there was money, things worked that way. So I thought that was obvious because Fallout both acted on this theme and said it right at the beginning, but that was the main thing, was the ultimate end of that corruption was the entire planet was corrupted. Arcanum looked at the same issue with a different way. By the way, there's spoilers for all these games. I can't believe... do I have to put a spoiler alert on games that are decades old? Arcanum, sometimes superficially, people view it as, well, the rise of industrialism is a bad thing. Look at all the bad things that happened from that. There were people... the orcs were pretty much turned into wage slaves, and there was a lot of unethical behavior and all this. And that's true. But that isn't necessarily an indictment of industrialism. You could view it as the theme of, that's just a system of power. It's an institution, and humans are involved in it, so they're going to corrupt it. Because as you played Arcanum, you found out that before industrialism, there was kind of like this council of wizards, and they were corrupt too. They would aggressively and terrifically put down any threat to them, including industrialism. The whole Vendigroth sub-story in Arcanum is about how there had already been an industrial society that rose up, and they laid waste to it. And I shouldn't say they, it was eventually one person on the council, and they kind of recognized how they were being corrupt, and they stepped down from that role. But then, of course, when industrialism rose again, it got corrupted. That's a fundamental theme to Arcanum. And then finally, The Outer Worlds looks at it from a different way. The Outer Worlds has the rise of corporatism, that corporations ruled all aspects of people's lives. And of course, the people controlling those corporations became incredibly corrupt. They ended up manipulating the government there. They manipulated people. People's entire lives rotated around what these corporations wanted to do. And it can be viewed as anti-corporate, but really, again, the theme there is once you have some kind of institution in place, the humans involved in it are going to corrupt it to their own end. Now, there are other games I worked on that explore this theme in lesser detail because I didn't invent the IP. You can look at Temple of Elemental Evil. That was Gary Gygax's and Mike Mentzer's IP. They had already created it. But when I took it over to make a computer game, one of the first questions I wanted to ask was, how is this supposed to end? When you actually get into the Temple of Elemental Evil and you go up against Zugtmoy, who is pulling the strings of all these temples, what are you supposed to do? In the module, it seemed like you were always supposed to kill her, or, barring your ability to do that, banish her back to the abyss. But it occurred to me, because of the way my games work, what if I'm evil? What if I'm far worse than Zugtmoy? What if I see Zugtmoy as the lesser evil between me and her? So I put in the whole thing about, hey, Zugtmoy, you work for me now. Or, if you're not quite that evil, hey, why don't I work for you? So instead of banishing her or even being able to kill her, I put in these whole other alternative endings where you could say, I'll work for you. Let's do this. Let's take over this whole region. Or, hey, you work for me now. We're taking over the region, but I'm in charge. Both of those are variants of that theme, that there's going to be an new institution in place, and you're going to be at top of it, and you're corrupted. Vampire, a whole big chunk of that was all the different clans. They all had people running them. They all were doing it for power. You were gaining power. It's all about corruption. I think the Ventru, which was the main clan that was trying to pull the strings in the story here, massive corruption there. And I think Jack was the one who was supposed to represent, us, the game developers, kind of view of just laughing at this and turning it around, turning the tables on them, so their own attempt to grab power is what would destroy them. Pillars of Eternity, the whole thing about the reincarnation system and the gods, that was just people who saw a power vacuum, grabbed it, and put an entire mechanism in place to basically keep all the rest of the humans in existence under their thumb. If that isn't the ultimate corruption tale, I don't know what is. And then, of course, I don't even think I need to describe tyranny. Tyranny is the story of corruption wins. Someone figured out how the nature of magic and how edicts worked, and they put themselves in the ultimate position of power, the ultimate corruption. So, we've often said it's Lord of the Rings if Sauron had won. That's tyranny. So, I think that if you look at my games through that lens, you can see that there is a theme that run through all my games. Now, just as a sidebar, is this my view in real life? Do I walk around going, everybody's corrupted? Not necessarily. But I think when people talk about how bad a system is, and by system or institution, I mean anything. It could be economic, it could be political, it could be corporate, it could be religious. All these systems have one thing in common, which is people are involved in them and corrupt the system. When people go, this is terrible, we need to do something else, I always wonder, what system are you planning to put in place as an alternative? How can it not be corrupted? Some of you are maybe more comfortable calling it gaming. You're like, people are just gaming the system. Okay, that's a form of corruption. You're gaming it to gain power and or wealth and or security for yourself at the cost of other people. It's a corruption. I've never ever heard an alternative being expressed that I think can withstand our own human nature. That's kind of the whole story of Fallout. All the governments fell. All of them took part in the nuclear war. I think there are rare individuals that can go through life being uncorrupted, but I've never seen a system that can exist without being corrupted, because eventually corrupted or wealth-seeking or power-seeking individuals will enter the system and corrupt it. Now, I do think, in my hope of hope, being the naive, optimistic person I am, I've got a whole video on that post-scarcity may solve this. I think if we develop technologically so that everybody's needs are satiated, and even their wants are satiated. I think once that happens, I think for a lot of people, they realize that that's not really what they wanted. Once you can have whatever you want, and you realize it's not filling that hole, you realize that improving yourself is what will fill that hole. So you may get all the money you want, although what money means in a post-scarcity society, I don't know. You may get the beach house, you may have the cars and planes and flying cars, or whatever it is you think will make you eventually be happy. And you may realize that's not it. Or you may just go, well, Tim, I don't have wants, I just have needs. I need a house, I need medical care, I need food and clothing. Once you get all that, and you're sitting in your house, and you're healthy, and you're fed, and you're clothed, you may realize, is that enough? There's something more you want. And then I think that's, in that situation, that's where people realize, I want to be a better person. I want to learn how to do things. I want to follow where my skills take me. I want to be really good at stuff. I want to learn things. I want to be better. I think that's what a post-scarcity society can do for people. I hope we reach it before the other institutions mess us up. Now, why am I talking about this in a game development channel? I've said this repeatedly in a lot of my videos, too numerous to mention here, that if you are a game director, you want to have a POV. You want it so that once you make a number of games, it would be nice if people could point to them and go, oh, that's a game from so-and-so. Whether it's you personally or the game company that you're running, people recognize it's a game from that. Whether your theme controls the setting or the mechanics or the story or just the general background theme of the games, which all of mine have. I think it's really good to have that POV. If you don't, your games are going to feel a little bland, a little vanilla. And I think there's a danger there. Also, while you do all this, just try to keep in mind that you're working in systems that are corrupt. You can't avoid them. There's no alternatives out there. So try to be like Sam Wise Gamgee from Lord of the Rings. I almost said Frodo, but Frodo pretty much got corrupted, especially there at the end. He succumbed, and he had to go into the West. Be like Sam. Sam did deal with the corruption. He didn't really get corrupted himself. There's an argument that he did, and eventually at the end of his life, he went into the West. He carried that ring and used that ring, and then as soon as Frodo asked for it back, he's like, here you go. Be like Sam. That's a good goal in life. So if you want to be a game director, have a strong POV, deal with the corrupted systems, try to remain uncorrupted yourself.